I'm Rochelle Grayson. I'm going to be the moderator. I'm going to be also the host for the rest of the afternoon. And I am with Mosaic Accelerator and Circles of AI. Many of you have heard about what I'm doing, so this is not about me. You'll learn more about me a little bit later this afternoon. But our panel today, mastering data storytelling. That's what we're going to talk about. And from the room, it seems like there are a lot of people who are interested. So to kick this off, I'm going to let each of our panelists introduce themselves and talk about and answer the question, why is data storytelling important, or what is its role in your organization? So they have some context and you have some context as to what that looks like. Okay? Go for it. And I'll start with Parveen.
Let's start off. Hi, everyone. I'm Parveen Sarana. I am at BCAA. I am a manager in marketing, database, and analytics. And outside of that, I am an adjunct professor at UBC, where I teach data visualization in their MBA program. Prior to this, I was at Lululemon in data product management and marketing science. And I bring this up one more prior to say I was a data scientist at TransLink, saying a little bit about this because I've hopped industries several times, but I think the work that I do is quite similar, and what I find myself most passionate about is figuring out whether it be what tool or what communication style or what is it that's going to bridge that between the data and actually making that business decision, what is going to facilitate that storytelling. I think that's what that puzzle is really energizing to me. So that's where I sort of fit into this conversation. Would we like to answer the question in our intros, or?
Yeah, you can ask, yeah.
For sure, we'll start there. I think for me, and everyone might have a little bit of a different opinion on this, I think that this storytelling of data is perhaps the most important part of sort of this journey with data towards making business decisions. I think you can have the cleanest data, even though that's really important, and have that stored in the best way, or have the greatest tools or the most advanced way of processing something. But if you're unable to communicate that, if you're unable to have everyone in your organization, technical or non-technical, kind of understand that journey, it's kind of all for naught. So I think that's why I think it's so important.
Great. I'm Tom Petryshen. I work for a startup based in Australia that runs a marketplace. So it's two-sided. I'm dealing with two different types of users. On one side, we have businesses looking for short-term office space, anywhere from 6 months to 3 years. And then on the other side, we have the operators offering that space. And it could be anywhere from the WeWorks and the Regises of the world to landlords who want to carve up all the excess space they have in their buildings today and slap a kind of a short-term agreement on that to make it a bit more flexible. So in my day-to-day operations, I kind of look at storytelling from two different perspectives. From a market perspective, I'm taking all the data that we got, all the listings that we have, and looking at the trends that are happening in the marketplace. So as prices change, unlike commercial real estate, which doesn't really fluctuate that much, in the short-term spaces, prices can change almost on a weekly basis. So if I look back at the last 5 years since we've been collecting that data, I can almost tell when stoppages happened in different countries. When they basically shut down and made everybody work from home because our supply increased, our prices dropped. And today, I can actually use my minor in economics to tell that story in a way that ties in the economic data that's happening in each of the markets, whether it's high interest rates in the UK versus Australia versus the US, or whether it's the war in Ukraine and how that's having an impact on business sentiment and how that plays a part in kind of the story. And the reason we do that is really twofold. One is we use it to create PR within the industry that we're working with, so that raises our profile in the different communities that we are there, which drives more business, which brings back to the site. And the other aspect of data storytelling that I use quite often is looking at the customer journey on our website. So we don't have a simple e-commerce one-click journey. It's multiple steps. People will sign up. They'll sometimes request a quote. Other times they'll contact our operators, ask for a tour themselves, or just ask for more feedback. Sometimes we'll jump in and answer some of those questions for them. And then all of it the end of it happens offline. So I've got to be able to kind of join all that up with the different, whether it's our data sitting in HubSpot, whether it's the analytics data, which is getting harder and harder to kind of analyze these days because Google and the other analytics providers are cutting off all the kind of the referral data that's there. Just trying to tell that story so that even though I'm on a small team, I can still go to our CEO and say, hey, look, we need to move in this direction. in order to actually capitalize or improve our customer journey, cut down on the expenses or the wastage of advertising that we're using today. So I've taken my last kind of 25, 28 years in business and kind of wrapped that into a role today that is kind of fun and exciting. I don't hate data anymore. I actually enjoy it because I get to work with tools that make it a lot easier for me. My process isn't today, probably not the cleanest as it could be, so I'm going to get some help on that soon. But yeah, for me, it's all about the messaging.
Sure. My name is Rian Tischendorf. I work for Snowflake, and I lead the sales engineering effort across Western Canada. For me, data storytelling or storytelling in general is mainly twofold. One is internal, and the other one is external. Being in a sales engineering or a solutions engineering role, I do sales, right? So I need to talk to customers and say, hey, you need to buy this product. Why, right? And I need to be able to communicate that. And what happens a lot of time is that they're on this side of the bridge, and you're on this side of the bridge, and you somehow need to take their hand and walk them with you to the place that you want them to be, right? And how do you do that? Through storytelling. If I tell you, oh, you should buy it because of these features or these things, nobody gives a shit, right? To be honest, they don't, right? But if I tell you, hey, have you ever had the situation where this happened to you? What did you do? Make them part of the story, right? And tell them, you could do this differently, right? And tell them that story. And so that's the outward part, and that's really helping customers understand the art of the possible and what we can offer, and get everybody on the same page. Internally, there's a lot of data storytelling in terms of understanding your customer base, right? So if I deal with a certain type of customer or a certain size of customer, how do I know what I need to be able to communicate to these people as in terms of value or use cases or things like that? So really to understand internally the data that we capture, how that describes the customer, and how to basically translate that into action, which to me is the ultimate end of everything, right? I want to be able to do something with my data. I want to be able to move something, do something, move someone, make more money, do whatever. And so how do you put those things together? And that's really what data storytelling is for my role.
Wonderful. So we have a variety of different examples here, and hopefully you'll find some nuggets. I wanted to start, and Parveen, you kind of touched upon data storytelling is the most important part of what we do with the data we have. But I do want to take one quick step back, and Tom, I may ask you to start with this, and it's around data collection. And we talk about all the different steps: collection, cleaning, analysis, and usually then insights, then visualization. Why should we care about data collection when it comes to data storytelling? How is that even connected?
Well, if you're interested in actually telling a story that's not biased, that data has to be as clean as possible. It has to be as consistent as possible. I'll give you a good example that I've just experienced in the last 4 months. Prior to heading off to Europe for my summer holiday, I realized that we had a major issue with our data collection. We had changed the schema of our listings in February, I think it was, and I didn't realize at the time that the scripts that I was using to extract the data weren't collecting all the new listings that we were adding to the platform. So the view that I saw was that inventory supply was actually falling, coming into June, which I'm looking at the demand side and going, that doesn't make sense. But I still had to get the report out before I left for July, so I had to make it fit the scenario as much as possible, even though that you shouldn't do that as a storyteller. I put some comments into the methodology notes just to ensure that people understood where we were coming from. But shortly before leaving, I realized that we had all these listings that weren't telling the full picture. And what was really happening was that our supply was actually going through the roof. If you understand how commercial real estate is kind of sold, it's done usually on a square foot basis or a square meter basis. And we went from, I think, 6 million square feet to 7.5 million square feet in a very short period of time. So that generally tells you something is going on in the marketplace that we're not aware of. And I just didn't see it at the time. So I had to spend a couple of months after I got back from Europe to kind of sort that out and then apply everything, backdate everything based on when it was added to the platform and whether it was taken off at a certain time or not, and whether prices changes. So it created a bit of havoc, and the recent report that I just published a few weeks ago now has that proper storyline. But without that, we end up being liars in the end, right? because we're interpreting the data in a way that it isn't actually true. Another example I'll just give really briefly is you look at the polls that happened in the US. Did they tell the story? Not at all, because they got the sampling wrong. They didn't ask the right questions. So I'll stop there.
And Rian, sorry. Make sure. Hello? Hello?
You broke it.
I broke it. I broke it. Woo-hoo. Okay. Rian, can you speak maybe, hello? Can you speak to maybe the issues around kind of something Tom touched upon, but like making sure your narrative fits the data? Like
Yeah, for sure. So just repeat the question. So the question is, how important or what is the role play of having the narrative that you want to tell fit the data, right? If I paraphrase that correctly. And I think data collection is extremely important. You need to have a base of knowledge to work with, to draw some conclusions. However, let's put it this way: if you're a sales organizer, or if you're a retailer, you don't collect data on airplane patterns, right? You collect sales data, you collect foot traffic data. So the data you collect should be related in some way, shape, or fashion to what the outcome is that you want to be able to action with the data. So to that end, a lot of times it's almost more important for me sometimes to start with narrative. Like, what do I want to tell with this data? I want to be able to tell how my stores are performing in a certain region, or is my e-com business stronger than my store business, just to stick with the retail example. So to do that, that's the narrative, right? I have some kind of hypothesis that I want to test out, and then you need to start gathering the data for that, right? That helps you guide you to which data you collect. The worst thing you can do is create what a lot of people call like a data lake, right? Where it's a swamp of all possible data points that you have in your organization, and 75% of that you never use. So just make sure that if you do start collecting data, and it's really important to collect a big swath, that it does fit into what you want to tell, and make sure it stays relevant.
Parveen, did you want to add anything to that?
I think you kind of summarized it really well, but just as you were answering, something that came to mind for me is this idea of like both bias we touched on and kind of picking a narrative. And I think it's important to keep in mind with bias, of course, we're going to try to do our best to minimize that bias, whether it be in the collection or how we present that information. But bias is something we're never really going to get away from, because in the end of the day, when you choose that narrative that you're going to tell, you're going to choose a hierarchy, even the most simplest example of which KPIs are going to make it to the executive dashboard, or what cadence are you going to show that information. All of these are choices that have our own sort of bias baked into things. And I think yes, we want to minimize those things. Yes, we want to be transparent with our stakeholders, but to some level, it's not so much bias, but it is sort of our expertise that we're bringing to the table. So I do think having a sort of strong choice in these things is sort of important there too. So kind of bias, but flipped a bit.
Great. So one of the things that was a great segue, because I was going to ask everyone a little bit about bias, and not just bias in the sense of the data, but also bias in our storytelling. So how do we avoid, like, okay, this is a narrative. I mean, I'm going to be sort of devil's advocate, Rian, that this is the narrative I want to have, so therefore I'm just going to pull only the data that supports my narrative. So this is what I want my C-suite to do. How do we make sure that we're actually revealing the insights of the data and not that we're just doing things? So I don't know if you want to just comment or
you
respond.
pulled my name, so I'll talk. I think it comes back to what I said earlier is what do you want to do with the data, right? What am I trying to do here? Well, I'm trying to optimize my sales, right? I have an hypothesis. Let's gather the information. And maybe that does introduce some bias, but through that you will discover data that you have or don't have, right? And the old saying is like, you don't know what you don't know. So you have to start somewhere. And I'm a firm believer in the whole theory of fail fast, right? Hey, I have this hypothesis. Let's gather this data. It didn't prove what I thought. Maybe my bias or my thought is wrong. Maybe the data I gathered is incorrect. Let's do another avenue, see what that brings us, and then decide, right? So, we're gonna probably that's gonna be the summary of this whole session is, do you get a bunch of data and then tell the story, or do you think you want to say something and then use the data to prove that, right? And I don't know the answer.
Well, I can say I teach data analytics courses, and I think actually the answer is both. I think there are times when I don't think it's an either or. I think there are times when you really are tasked with just telling me what does the data show, and it really is about what I call discovery. It is what am I seeing, what are the trends, what's happening, and that's a really valid analysis, and that's a really great story to tell. And sometimes it is based on a hypothesis. And sometimes the hypothesis may not be your own. Sometimes the hypothesis may be your boss's or your C-suite, and this is what they say is true. And so you need to either prove or disprove what they are saying. And so I think when we talk about data storytelling, both are valid options, and part of it is often I say starting at the end and really figuring out what is your goal. Is your goal an objective? You guys have heard this how many times today already? Goals and objectives, goals and objectives. What is your goal and objective of the analysis and of the story you want to tell? Okay, great. Let's talk a little bit about sort of audiences. So how do you tell data storytelling to maybe different audiences? What are things you should consider around that? What do you guys think about some of those things? Have you had different audiences that you've had to do that? So how do you navigate that?
I'd like to go to the phrase that Rian brought up, you don't know what you don't know. And I think that goes for your audience as well. I think whoever your stakeholders are, whoever your audience is, they have some inherent idea of whether it be their hypothesis or what they want the outcome to be or what problem they're trying to solve. And you don't know till you don't know, or till you ask. So I think that having those conversations up front is really important, getting an understanding of what are their pain points and kind of letting that build both the hypothesis or the process you're going to go through is really important. And I think along with that, we've been having a lot of conversations today about how do you get sort of buy-in for new platforms or new processes. I think it's about bringing that audience along with you. So they might not know the sort of how to get there, but they probably have an idea about the endpoint and they definitely know about their problem. And I think it's on us as sort of data practitioners, I'll call us, to sort of lead that path for them. And that really starts with asking them what it is that they need.
Yeah, look, understanding your audience is critical to getting the result that you want from your story or your data, right? So if you don't understand the audience, it's kind of difficult to then, get anything back from them, from what you're trying to create. So in my case, if I'm writing a business report for businesses to kind of understand what we do, ultimately I want them to come and use our platform in order to, reduce the complexity of finding an office at the end of the day. So if my story doesn't include enough understanding that we're really simplifying the market for them by coming to work with us, it's not going to get the result that we want as a business, and I'm wasting my time and energy. If I'm talking to the C-suite or any CEO, understanding their needs is once again super critical. What do they want at the end of the day? Well, they want to increase revenues, they want to cut costs and mitigate risks. That's shareholder value, increasing shareholder value. Now, if you're the CEO of a health organization, mitigating risk might be at the top of your list because it's not a good idea to kill people in your business. So understanding those differences and understanding what is going to keep them awake at night allows you then to work backwards to produce a story that's actually going to get some actionable results at the end of the day, right? It's not just here's the report and here's the number at the end of the day. It's here's 4 actionable items we can actually do from our analysis of this data that's going to impact the revenue moving forward, or is going to cut costs and improve efficiency and cut costs, so that you still kind of attack one of their 3 pillars that they've got to worry about at nighttime. So from that perspective, it really kind of bases your thought pattern and how you're going to articulate that story. The CEO, you have to condense things. You can't overwhelm them with too much information, otherwise it's just going to get ignored. So putting it into summaries, if you're giving a presentation, making sure you come up front with the action items that you want to solve right away, so that they're not having to wait till the end of the presentation to get that information from you.
I'll put it into context of what we sell, right? So it's not a plug, but maybe a plug. So at Snowflake, right? It's a data platform. And if I go and show a CEO how fast we can execute SQL, he doesn't care. Right? It'll bore him out of his skull. And what happens typically in meetings we have is we have, the director of analytics and the vice president of something and then a DBA all in the same room. So how do you engage them? How do you make sure that each of them get out of this meeting that they want? If I start out of the gate and say, hey, look at this cool SQL feature we have on-demand storage, and DBA is going to be the best meeting of his life, right? CEO is going to take, 5 minutes, and he's going to, or not the CEO, like let's say VP, right? He's going to check out. So how do we keep him engaged? And to your point, like put that up front and say, hey, here's the outcome, right? You care about cost reduction. You care about analyzing or predicting your sales. Here's how we can do this. And look at this. This is cool, right? Yes. Do you like that? Yes. Do you have questions? No. Let me show you how we got there. And then start peeling it back a layer down, right? And then go down another layers like, all right, where did the data come from? How do we execute it? How do we build this? So that way you satisfy the higher level, let's call it the higher level personas, get what they need, and then they can, continue sending emails and stuff while you talk to the rest of them. It happens, right? Everybody here knows that happens. So that's typically my approach.
Great. So, we've talked a lot about sort of the audience and data and telling good stories. So how do you effectively, you've given some examples, but can you give some practical things? Like, okay, I'm going to walk out of this thing after 30 minutes. What are some tips that you can give the audience around how to tell really good storytelling or to tell great data stories, and or what has worked really well for you?
I'll start.
No, go ahead.
I like to start with, my data stories or stories in general are typically attached to an outcome. Right? I want the customer to move to the next meeting. I want the customer to action something. So to me, it's all about recognizing what I want and recognizing what they need to get there, right? And then joining the two. Is that the bridge in the middle and the two sides, right? How do I get them there? If I don't know, there's data people here, so I can tell the story. And for those VP levels, just hold on a second. If you're a DBA, right, and you dropped a table before, right, you know what pandemonium that creates, right? I would start off and say, hey, last year I was DBA, I did this, and you can imagine what happened. Like, yeah, get them to join into the story, get them to identify with the path you want to take them on. Like, hey, yeah, I'm a DBA. I dropped a table before as well. Like, yeah, that was chaos. Have it out a little bit and say, hey, within Snowflake, you don't have to worry about that because you can undrop the table within a second. Data is back. They're like, wow, yeah, that would have saved me so much effort and so much problems, right? It's identifying what you and now I've got him on my side. Number one, he kind of connected me. We connected on a level that he understands or she understands, and we can move forward together with a common understanding of that, right? And to me, that's key.
There.
Can I answer the question with an example that comes to mind? During my time at TransLink, I was in the bus speed and reliability program at the time. And at the time, it was a new program, and I was tasked with coming up with a bus speed and reliability metric that could communicate transit congestion for the first time in our region. And the audiences were very, very varied. So not only the various municipalities that we have here, but also our internal operating partners and also provincial government to get sort of buy-ins at these various levels. And I think what made that program successful or getting that metric off the ground successful was being very creative in each of those communication styles with the various audiences and kind of thinking about, we were talking about kind of coming up with answering the things that keep them up at night. On the flip side, thinking about what is the levers that are in their control. And so what I mean to say is in the operating partners, it maybe doesn't make sense to talk about municipal level like cost savings, right? Because that's not a lever that's in their control. So really thinking about not only what keeps them up at night, but what are the levers within their control, and what is it gonna take for them to sort of pull that lever? And in this example, the data was completely different for these various audiences. It was very high level summaries for the provincial government. For our operating partners, it actually wasn't enough to see the real-time information coming off the buses because they didn't have a ton of trust in the transportation authority. So that partnership maybe wasn't there. And the sort of creative solution in that case is I actually went down to bus depots and had bus operators sort of illustrate the data as they saw it. So they were taking that left turn every day. What does that look like? And now how can you capture that that in sort of a systematic way to now bring to the operating partners to pair with what we would call sort of objective data to say, hey, this has sort of anecdotal, real ground examples that are going on with your operators. So I think that kind of pairing all of these things, it's not really a one size fits all solution. You kind of have to get creative in that way, whether that be the data that you bring to the table, the problems that you want to kind of bring to the top, and also understanding not only your audience's problems, but what's kind of in their control and what isn't. So I guess I would implore everyone to get a little creative with it.
Well, it always starts with a what, but I think the challenge is depending on whether you're a team of 1 or 2, whether you're a team of 20 or more, right? So you know, there's going to be people in the organization who get the what, but they don't necessarily share it with everyone else, right? So, and in a hybrid world, it's much more difficult to kind of understand and keep everybody on the same page. And it doesn't matter whether it's, you know, incorporating AI today or telling the story. We have to do a better job as teams, actually, from the top all the way down to the database architect or engineer, to understand what is required. You know, what is the what? And, you know, that could mean in today's world is, you know, the managers, the C-suites actually taking out the engineers, the data storytellers, the analysis for lunch, having a one-on-one with them, understanding what they're doing, where their challenges are, you know, getting them to ask you questions on what keeps you up at night, going back to what are the levers you can control. We need to do a much better job today with that type of communication, so that it's understood right from the top all the way down. So it's about aligning the business goals with the data strategy that you might have within the organization. One doesn't live without the others. So you just have to work at that. And I think if you're a junior, you should be inviting your managers out for lunch. Do it with your peers to practice, and then, you know, work up to the point where you get, hey, let's go out for lunch, and just pepper them with questions. Find out as much as you can to ensure that you can do your job better. That applies to a whole bunch of different roles, but I think in data today, it's even more important.
So 27 minutes and 45 seconds before we mentioned AI.
Awesome. We're good. Okay, so we have now a few minutes left. 5 minutes, 2 minutes left. Okay, questions. Yes, go for it. Here, I'll come to you. I have the mic, so I'm the runner. Okay, here we go.
Thank you. I'm Rossetti Levy from the David Suzuki Foundation, which is a nonprofit. I was wondering if you had any practical tips on how to tell a data story about failure. For context, I'm sitting on data that can say, oh, this particular initiative is not meeting our objectives, or this decision was actually a bad decision. How can I tell that story without burning bridges, basically?
I just had an idea of having a bar chart with the heads of the department that were responsible for the failure at the very top, just to help you communicate that. But I'll let Parveen.
That was creative. I think you should do that. It's a difficult position to be in, and I've been in that position in different times in my career. I think it's important to be honest about what's happening, and I think that's what our kind of role on the team is, right? We're all kind of bringing our various expertise, and it's on us to not manipulate the data, but show what the true data story is, especially if those objectives have already been written. Say whatever is meant to be measured isn't kind of measuring out as expected, and I think that's important to bring to the table. I think something to soften the blow could be perhaps recommendations. Why is it not being successful? It's X, Y, and Z lever that we were trying to move that aren't actually moving the way that we thought, or perhaps explaining where we went wrong in the process. So maybe our assumptions were kind of not netting out in the way that we thought. I think being able to explain how we got here, and what would be even better is like how we might make it different, would really help that story. So I don't think it's about sort of hiding the failure, but explaining how we got there, and hopefully some indication or recommendation about how you can get out of that hole.
That's a great answer. I would add one more thing to that is you almost need them to buy into that. Like, hey, here's what here's the data I'm seeing. These are the potential issues. So this is maybe why. But what do you think? Do you think this is accurate or not? Right? And if it is, then let's talk about it. And if it's not, then you tell me where should I go look.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up. So thank you, everyone. Please, let's thank the panel for all their insights and